Hello, it's Andrine, a Jewish American priestess. I'm bringing you today a reading. We're going to talk about ancestors a little bit. I've been doing some ancestral work, and my heritage is mixed. So I'm pulling out the deck, the Mythologia Fennica Tarot deck today. It is a deck that is based upon the mythology of the Finnish people. And we're going to do a Hebrune reading based on whatever cards we pull out of that today. So let's see what comes up first of all. And then we'll go into our readings. I'll put the timestamps down below so we'll have an idea of where your reading will be. Well, let's pull out. There's one. Two. And one more card. Sometimes they're a little stubborn. There we go. Third card. Okay, so we're going to pull out 3 cards today. We're going to take a look and see what are our messages from our ancestors right now. Card number 1, we have Liekkiö. Liekkiö. Okay. Card number 2, we have the Lass of Tuonela. And for card number 3, we have the Pike of Tuonela. And I'll go into what each of these cards represents and how they correspond to the traditional tarot in your reading. But take a moment to take a look at these cards and see which one is calling to you today in terms of a message from your ancestors. And we'll see you in your reading. Okay, for those of you who chose the card Liekkiö, this is corresponding to the 3 of Swords in the traditional tarot, which is kind of a challenging card. It's frequently depicted as a heart with 3 swords stabbing through it. And in the case of Liekkiö, it is similarly about sorrow and worries and doubts and feelings of loss of balance and lack of clarity. It speaks to this idea that in the olden days, illegitimate children were outcasts of communities, and there were very strict norms of society, and punishment made some women strive to hide their unwanted pregnancy and then kill the child, bury it without being noticed or to avoid being ostracized. This spirit would then appear to the mother and try to gain the attention of passersby by crying. So it's a difficult and haunting idea, but we know it's true. We know that in the past people were so shamed by their illegitimate pregnancies, which is to say pregnancies that were unwanted because, for instance, it could be a result of incest or a rape or a questionable relationship, that women in particular either be ostracized by their communities or take drastic measures in order to be able to continue to function. And that's just so horrible. It's just so awful. And we are in a situation now in our country where that is a very real threat again. So maybe it's the It's the ghosts of these children that are coming up right now to bring in messages to you, that they are saying we need to have the ability to make choices about our own bodies right now in the world. So if you chose this card, I mean, it's a challenging message, but we need to listen to it nonetheless. Looking for justice. So let's see what the Hebrunes have to say. I'm going to set the card off to the side here. It's a little bright. Let me see if I can shift the light. It's a little better. Okay. Let's pull out some Hebrunes today to see what kind of messages we can get from this challenging and difficult card. The Three of Swords. There may be something that is shameful, something you've been trying to hide, something from your past that is trying to come up to get your attention. And at the top of the reading we have the letter Gimel. In the center we have the letter Yud. And on the lower level we have the letter Ayin. Okay. As we look at this reading, the top letter represents that which is our current situation, and we have the letter Gimel. Gimel is about movement forward. It is the letter that represents a foot or a camel moving forward in the world. And it is this binary transformation of peace and evil. So I think that's where we're talking about here. There's been something that has brought up this binary of what is going to bring us peace and what is not going to bring us peace, what is going to bring us discomfort. And we need to find that wholeness and work within the brokenness that exists in order to find that wholeness. It's a very challenging time. Gimel also rules over the planet Jupiter in the sky. And Jupiter in Hebrew is called Tzedek, which means justice. So we are talking about justice here. We're talking about how can we move forward to ensure that justice gets done. How can we find that wholeness in our lives after a period of brokenness? It is the letter that corresponds, in my reading of the Hebrunes, to the patriarch Yaakov. Yaakov was the one who felt like he was constantly running. He made some decisions and actions in his home where he stole the birthright from his brother Esau, and he stole the blessing from his brother by deceiving his father, and then needed to run because his brother wanted to kill him. In the midst of that running, as he went toward Laban, his uncle's land, he discovered these dreams where he was seeing the angels running and returning on the ladder to and from the earth toward heaven. And he realized that the divine was there in this very place, Hamakom Hazeh, right here, right now. This realization that the divine is with us regardless of where we are, whether we're on our own running forward. And that realization changed everything. Yaakov then on the way back to his homeland encountered the divine again. And the divine at that point wrestled with him. And that's where we get the name Yisrael, the one who wrestles with the divine. We have Yisrael. Anyone who wrestles with the concept of divinity is here for this. So coming out of these really challenging situations, we have the opportunity to find wholeness again. And Yaakov eventually does make it back to his land and reunites with his brother, makes peace there, makes wholeness there. And that's what we're talking about. This is our current situation. There's something that's justice that needs to happen. There is some form of reconciliation that perhaps needs to happen. That there's been some really difficult choices that we've made in the past, maybe based on injustice that we have no control over. And now it's time to move forward toward finding that wholeness that will come out of this difficult situation. And our challenge here in the center is the letter Yud. And interestingly, the letter Yud is the letter that begins the name of the divine, the Yud He Vav He, the one who is becoming. So we're challenging, we're wrestling with the divine here. That's exactly what the challenge is. That we have this new idea, perhaps a seed, maybe even the foundation of sexuality that corresponds to the Yud in the Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, that seed that is planted in our situation is causing us some irritation. So maybe it's like a grain of sand in an oyster will produce a pearl. Maybe it's some agitation that is giving us pause right now. And what's coming through for me from the ancestors here is we need to understand that agitation, that irritation, that wrestling that we're doing with the concept of divinity is the thing that will bring us through to wholeness. We've got the Yud, which is the number 10 in Gematria, and that represents the ultimate manifestation of oneness, that's bringing everything back together to the one. That it is the first letter of the divine name, that it represents a hand, a yad. And the yad is also that pointer that we use when we're reading Torah. It's oftentimes shaped like a hand that is pointing, and we hold that while we're reading Torah. What are we pointing at? And can we come to understand that the thing we're using to point at a thing is not the thing, but the understanding of the actual meaning of the words is really what it's about, not the words themselves, not the scroll itself, certainly not the pointer. And how can we come to understand as we wrestle with the divine that that's part of the journey here? So when it comes down to it, our challenge in this situation is, how do we wrestle with the divine? How do we perhaps even rail at God about the injustices of the world and still come to some form of wholeness in the end? How do we balance the 10 Sephirot of the divine, the emanations of the divine, with justice and understanding and love and loving kindness and strong foundations in the world, and these 10 commandments, which are all prohibitive? How do we find a way to balance those things on that oneness, on that single point? And our outcome in the situation, given the current circumstances, is the letter Ayin. And the letter Ayin is the letter that represents an eye in the body. It represents traditionally the eye of the divine watching over us. It is vision. It's being watched over. And it's also an ultimate completion letter because it is the number 70 in Gematria, and 7 is the number of days of creation, and 10 times 7 is that ultimate manifestation of that sevenness. So we have 70 here, and there are so many 70s in Torah. We have the 70 descendants of Noach, and we have the 70 members of Yaakov's tribe as they descend into Mitzrayim. We have the 70 elders of Moses, as they travel in the desert. And the 70 seats of the Sanhedrin, the ruling body that made decisions about justice. Ayin corresponds to the tribe of Dan, which is the tribe which means judgment. So as I look at it in terms of the tarot cards, it corresponds to the judgment card, which is this review and this rite of passage. And if you remember the traditional judgment card in tarot, it is looking like people being raised up from the dead, which brings us back to Liekkiö, that there will be a time when justice is served, the final judgment, if you want to think of it that way, but there will be some form of judgment that comes not from us, but from the divine itself. And that we will have clarity. We'll have the ability to see clear. And the last thing that strikes me about the Ayin that's interesting here is that it It corresponds to the foundation of laughter in the Sefer Yetzirah. Laughter, which seems odd in terms of this card particularly, but perhaps as we come through all of this, as we are walking forward with the Gimel, struggling with our relationship with divinity, that when we see clearly, there will be ability to find joy again, that we will find that wholeness that comes out of this, and connection with divine, and some form of joy and laughter in the final result. And that's my hope here with regards to Liekkiö, that there will be justice and there will be the ability to find joy again and wholeness again, that foundation of peace as we walk away from the brokenness that we've come through, that the brokenness itself will serve to inform the wholeness when it comes. And so for those of you who chose the Liekkiö card, this has been your reading. I hope that you found it useful. If you did, please like and subscribe, and do check out my link in the comments section, finding out more about the Hebrunes. I'll see you here next time. Hello, those of you who chose the Lass of Tuonela. This is what your card looks like. She is the 13th card in the tarot deck. For those of you who know anything about tarot, it is the card that represents death. And death is a transformative thing. It's not just literally about death. The Lass of Tuonela is the one who ferries the souls of the dead over the Black River of Tuonela to the island of Manala. And she has a boat with a figurehead that's shaped like a moose head. It's not visible on this card, but it is visible on the cover of this book. You can see it looks like that as she ferries the dead across the river. So it is about recognizing one's own mortality. But it is mostly about transformation and leaving that behind which you need to let go of, and transitioning to a new beginning. It's about a completion of a thing. And I'm not sure what that means for you regarding your ancestral message here today. But let's pull out some Hebrunes and see if we can get some further clarity. I'm going to set the Lass over here on the side, and we'll open our bag of Hebrunes and see what comes out. So at the top of our reading, we have the letter Tzadi. In the center, we have the letter Nun. And on the bottom, we have the letter Dalet. Oh, wow. Okay. So, that's really interesting. So, Tzadi is the letter that represents justice or righteousness. It is the letter that begins the word Tzadik, which is someone who is considered a saint or a righteous person. It is considered the letter that begins the word Tzedek, which means justice itself. And it is the foundation of thought in the Sefer Yetzirah. So really thinking things through and figuring it out. The letter Tzadi is, some say that it looks like a nun with a yud on its back. So the nun would be this part of it, and the yud would be this part of it. And nun is all about humility, which we'll see here because that's our second letter. So we have this idea of being humble, but having the divine at our back. And the top letter in our reading is the letter which represents where we are right now. So something about justice is up. It is also the letter that begins the word Tzayid, which means hunting. And so about searching for something in the world. Ideally, you're searching for righteousness. You're searching for those sparks that have been scattered into the world. There is the story of the divine, which existed before time and space, existing everywhere. And then in order to make the universe, the divine had to contract themselves down into one point. And that contraction, which is called Tzimtzum, also begins with the letter Tzadi. So Tzimtzumai is one of the names of the divine, is the one who makes space. When the divine contracted themselves into one spot, they tried to contain the light within vessels, is the story. And those vessels were unable to contain that light, so it shattered out into the world. And those bits of light are sparks that exist in all of creation. And our job as people in this world is to collect those sparks. So when we recognize the bright light in a person, when we recognize the divine in another person, it's our job to connect with them and bring back all the pieces of divinity back together in this repair process. So the tzadi speaks to all of that here. One way to do that is to be a righteous person, to serve justice in the world. The tzadi is the number 90 in Gematria, and the matriarch Sarah was 90 years old, it is said, when Yitzhak was born, so she was quite elderly. 90 is 10 times 9, of course, and so it's this ultimate manifestation of the number 9. The number 9 in Hebrew is represented by the letter Tet, and Tet is said to be a cup or a womb, and also the first letter of the word Tov. So there's something about this ultimate manifestation of gestation and goodness that comes with the tzadi. So we have this ultimate manifestation of goodness and gestation, and that is coming together to make justice happen. Goodness and gestation together, magnified, brings about righteousness and justice. Because Yitzhak, whose name has a tzadi in it, was born when Sarah was 98, it said that all children born have the ability to become a tzaddik. Everyone born has the ability to become a righteous person. The other thing that's interesting about tzadi is that it is corresponding to the tribe of Asher. Asher is the son of Zilpah, who was the handmaid of Leah, and Zilpah, it is said, potentially came from a different tribe. And so she named her son Asher, and Asher means happy in Hebrew, but it also is sort of a call out to the goddess, the Asherah, who is revered through the trees. So right now in this time of year, when the trees are budding and starting to flower, there's this beautiful call out to Asherah. How can we revere the goddess of the universe in all her many forms, including through the fertility of the trees? And I love that that's coming in right now at this time of year. And in my correspondences with the Hebrunes, as they relate to the tarot cards, I see tzadi as relating to justice card, which talks about fairness and balance and ethics. So here we have this current situation of justice, and it relates to the lass of Tuonela. She is this neutral party that carries the departed to their new place. How can we serve those who have gone before us? And when we're talking about messages from the ancestors, perhaps we are being asked to honor the dead with righteousness and with justice. By doing righteousness in the world, we can honor our departed in that way. And in the center of our reading, we have the letter Nun. And Nun is the letter that is all about humility. It is a bent over person, kneeling with their head bowed. It is the first letter of the word Ne'aman, which means humble, and also the first letter of the word Nes, which means miracle. It speaks to faithfulness and humility and loyalty. It is the foundation of locomotion in the Sefer Yetzirah. So it's about setting forward on some sort of path that will be sustainable. And this position in the reading is the position of that which is a challenge right now. So as we're working toward justice, as we're working toward honoring those folks who came before us, as we are setting off on this pathway for righteousness, the challenge here is, how do we remain humble? How do we not get ahead of ourselves or full of ourselves? And how can we start a progress which is sustainable and not just a flash in the pan? I see Nun as being the letter that corresponds to the Hermit card in traditional tarot. So someone who has spent time in silence, has spent time in contemplation, and really is humble, but also guiding the way. So how do we become that hermit? How do we do that without, again, becoming full of ourselves? And the way to do that, according to the Tzadi, is to become humble, but have the divine at our back at all times. And remember that we are here in service to the divine. That's the challenge right now, is how do we find that humility in our process as we're working toward righteousness and justice. And the outcome letter, which is at the bottom here and represents what is the outcome of our situation given the current circumstances, is the letter Dalet. Dalet is a doorway. It's a gateway. It's a transition point. It's exactly what we're talking about here with the Lass of Tuonela. It actually, in my book, corresponds to the death card, the same card we have here. Because there is this transition. There is this doorway and this gateway. It's a liminal space, but it's a time to pass through it. And maybe we need the help of our ancestors to get across that river. Maybe we need to rely upon those who came before us to give us a hand to the other side. Dalet is the binary transformation of wisdom and foolishness. How can we find our wisdom? And I think it is because we're talking about ancestors reaching back to find the wisdom of the ancestors in order to help us through this doorway. Dalet also corresponds to the number 4 in Gematria, so it speaks to some form of stability in terms of the 4 directions, the north, south, east, and west, the 4 elements, the earth, air, fire, and water, and the 4 letters of the divine name, the Yud, He, Vav, He. I see Dalet as corresponding to the matriarch Rebecca in the Torah, because she entered the door of her mother-in-law Sarah's tent, and she also became a portal for Yaakov to enter into the world. So there's both going through doorways and becoming doorways for others, which also really speaks strongly to the idea of ancestors, because they became our portals. This is how we got here. So we're all about transitions here, and if we are able to seek justice, and if we are able to remain humble in the midst of that, we will make it through that doorway to the other side of the transition for whatever it is that we need to do here. Whatever our mission is right now, which seems to be about justice, it seems to be about righteousness, finding righteousness in the world. So for those of you who chose the Lass of Tuonela today, I think the message is pretty clear. Seek justice, be humble, and pass through that doorway as need be. This has been your reading. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. And if you're interested in learning more about the Hebrunes, there is a link in the description box to find out more. Thank you so much, and I'll see you here next time. Okay, for those of you who chose the Pike of Tuonela, this is what your card looks like. It's quite an interesting story. I'll try not to go into it in too great of depth, but it does correspond to the 10 of Cups in the traditional tarot, which is quite a lovely and celebratory card. So the Pike of Tuonela was the fish that swims in the water of the river of Tuonela, which is the black river through which the dead have to transverse to get to the other side. One of the heroes, Ilmarinen of Finland, had proposed to the maid of Pohjola, and her mother Lauhi had given him the task to prove his worthiness, and one of the final tasks was to capture the Pike of Tuonela. And when he was able to do that, he forged a fiery golden eagle that was used to catch the pike, and then he was able to fashion out of it a throne for his mother-in-law Lauhi at Pohjola. And out of that came his worthiness, and he was able to marry the bride, and there was a giant feast and a wedding that took place. So it's a card of great joy and success. The Ten of Cups is traditionally this card with a rainbow going overhead and a happy couple, dancing beneath it, families, and so on and so forth. So it is about success and coming to the finality of a situation. So that's the main card here. We're going to set the Pike here off to the side, and let's pull out some Hebrunes to get some further clarification about the thing that's coming to an end, the finality of your situation, and what you can see as a challenge and what can you see as the outcome of our situation here. So starting at the top, we have the letter Ayin. In the center, we have the letter Resh. And at the bottom, we have the letter Vav. Wow. Okay. So at the top, we have the letter Ayin, and the letter Ayin is this letter, which means it's an eye. It's the eye of the divine watching over each of us as we go through our lives and in through all of our human foibles. It's the number 70 in Gematria, so it does speak to a completion. And in the tarot cards, the number 10 is that completion number. In Hebrew, the number 7, because we have 7 days of creation. So this being 70, it's 10 times 7, so it's this ultimate manifestation of a completion. Something is coming to an end. Something wonderful and miraculous is coming to an end. And we are being watched over by the divine during this completion. The Ayin corresponds to the tribe of Dan, which means judgment. And so in my correlations to the traditional tarot cards, the Ayin corresponds to the Judgment card. It is a review, a rite of passage, and a transition of some sort that is coming to an end, similar to Ilmarinen having to complete this task in order to be able to marry his bride. So there is some kind of great task that you have been undergoing, perhaps it is coming to a completion now. And this review and rite of passage is providing an additional judgment. And the traditional judgment card in tarot shows people rising from the dead and something new coming out of it. So something is new. And we have this idea of the sight, this vision, being able to see our way forward, that is really strong here as well. The other thing that is coming up for me here around Ayin is that Ayin is the foundation of laughter. In the Sefer Yetzirah, each of the letters corresponds to some kind of foundation or sense. And the sense of laughter here with Ayin is saying that as we come to completion of this, even though the task has been arduous, there will be joy, there will be laughter. And that's really strongly represented in the 10 here, the 10 of cups, basically, the Pike of Tuonela. And I love that. I love that we have that joy that is coming out of this, even though we've had a challenging task at hand. It's coming to an end, and there will be joy and laughter through that. Our central letter is the letter Resh, and this position in the reading is that which is the challenge or the fear. And we have Resh, which means head. Rosh is head. So there's a fear about the new beginning. As we come to an end of a thing, what's the new beginning going to be like? So there's some kind of fear around that for you, that we have this idea of a new beginning. Resh is in the Torah, the first word is Bereshit. It means in the beginning. So Resh is right there in the very first word of Torah. It's the binary foundation of seed and barrenness. So maybe that's the concern, that as we come through this completion and we head into the new beginning, whatever it is, will it bear fruit? Will there be seed that comes out of this, or will things be barren? And that's a valid concern. We don't know. It's impossible to know. The other thing that comes up for me with Resh is that Resh is the first letter of the word Rocha, which means wickedness. So there may be some concern about whether the new beginning or whatever's coming next will be wicked or good. Resh also, you can see that it's got this bowed head to it. So there's something about humility or possibly even poverty. The word Rosh means a poor one. So maybe there's a fear about poverty as we come through the completion again of the task, whatever it is that we've just finished or are about to finish. Will we be poor? Will we have enough to get us through to the next thing? Resh corresponds to or rules over the planet Mercury in the sky. So there's also a communication piece here. I think we're still currently in Mercury retrograde. So there's maybe some challenges around communication. So be aware of those. In my understanding of the Hebrunes, as they relate to various characters in the Torah, Resh corresponds to the matriarch Rachel. And not because it begins with the letter Resh, which it does, but because Rachel or Rachel was a very complicated character. She had both the barrenness initially when she was unable to conceive for many, many years, and then she had the seed which brought us Joseph and Benjamin. Joseph, who was the one who went down to Egypt and allowed us to survive the famine and also put us into slavery. There's two sides of the coin here. Rachel, who was the one who Jacob loved and worked so hard for. He worked 14 years to be able to marry her, not unlike Ilmarinen, working so hard to try to gain the hand of the maid of Pohjola. But even so, Rachel had some complicated things. She stole her father's idols as they left the house, and then when he came chasing after them to demand his idols back, she lied about whether those idols were with her. She hid them under her skirts and said she was having her time of the month. And Yaakov, who was an honest person at that point, said, whoever is found with these idols will surely be put to death. And there's a commentary about whether Rachel's imminent death at the birth of Benjamin was because she had made those poor choices in the past. So there's a complication here with the Resh. Something new is coming into a beginning, but we don't know what it is. Will it bring us wealth? Will it bring us poverty? Will it bring us seed? Will it bring us barrenness? Is there the humility that is coming with it? Is there wickedness, in fact, coming with it? We don't know. Is there a poor communication that's happening? Is somebody lying to us? Is somebody not giving us all the information we need to make good decisions? And that's valid. We have these concerns and fears right now in the world. But our final outcome letter, given the current circumstances, is the letter Vav. And the letter Vav is all about connection. Vav is a tall, straight person standing with a slightly bowed head. So we have that idea of humility again right there. It stands tall like a taproot, going deep into the soil, but reaching up toward the heavens. It literally means "and" in Hebrew. So it's really all about connection. It is a peg or a hook that holds together things. It holds together the pieces of the tabernacle. It holds together the veils around the Holy of the Holies. And these pegs and hooks were frequently made out of very precious material. So even though they were small, their role was incredibly important. So it's about unity. It's about unity with divinity and possibly with another. It is both, it's also this like the spine in the body. And it is connected to the sense of hearing. In the Sefer Yetzirah, it is that sense of hearing in the foundation. So there's something that's coming that we'll be able to hear, that we start out with vision here and then we move into hearing. We can maybe see our way forward, but then we'll be able to hear correctly what's happening. And this is the letter right now that corresponds to the month of Iyar, which is that transition place between Passover and Shavuot, as we travel from Pesach liberation into Shavuot, which is revelation. And we have this connecting piece, the month of Iyar. It is connected to the tribe of Issachar, who is said to have combined the idea of wealth and study. And it is the number 6. So it speaks to the 6th day of creation, which is that which is almost complete. The number 6 is also speaking to the 6 directions, the north, south, east, west, up and down. So more three-dimensional idea of space, and really sacred space, because there are so many cultures that use the 6 directions in ceremony. It joins the heaven and the earth as well as all the directions around. There's a grammatical issue around Vav as well, is that it governs time in changing past to future. If you add a Vav to verbs, it can change a past tense verb to a future tense verb, and a future tense verb to a past tense verb. So there's really all these connecting pieces, the literal word and, the past and the future, the literal physical pegs and hooks in the tabernacle, as well as connection between ourselves, the divine, and other people. And in my correspondence to the tarot cards, this letter corresponds to the Lover's card, which is, again, perfect for the Pike of Tuonela, as we're talking about somebody who has done a variety of tasks in order to win their bride. And in the end, they find that connection, that lover's connection. And we can talk about lover's connection with another person, but we can also just talk about it with regards to ourselves. How can we find the lover in ourselves? So for those of you who chose the Pike of Tuonela, and this very interesting story about the tasks that were required of Ilmarinen in order to get his bride, we have this ability to see right now that we're being watched over by the divine, that we're very close to completing our task with that number 70, that right now we're struggling with what the new beginning will be, whether it will bear fruit, and whether it will be inherently wicked. We have some fears around that. Also possibly communication issues with the Mercury being in that position of fear or challenge. And in the outcome, we do have connection finally. We do have this connection with the divine, with another, and possibly with ourself. So stand tall with your strong taproot, reach up toward the sky, and know that the 10 of Cups here is showing celebration, unity, connection. I hope you liked this reading. If you did, please like and subscribe. And if you're interested in learning more about the Hebrunes, please check out the link in the description box below. And we'll see you here next time.